Hey everyone, Steve here once again with a video showing what Windows 10 looks like on my Hackintosh. In this video, I'll be showing how I installed Windows alongside my OS X hard drive and run a few benchmark tests within Windows on the current hardware I have. To get started, I needed a few items. One of them was a hard drive to place Windows on. Luckily, since I upgraded my SSD for my OS X partition, I had a spare 120GB SSD to install it on. The other item was the installation media for Windows 10. The way I obtained a copy was using a downloadable tool from Microsoft which downloads and installs the media on a USB drive with at least 8GB of space. After getting those two things ready, I got to work by first opening my case and removing the power and SATA cables connecting my OS X SSD. It's important to do this to protect the OS X partition, and a universal thing to do when installing Windows after placing OS X on a Hackintosh. From there, I placed my flash drive into my PC and booted off at the start. After booting off that, it's just basically the same process of installing Windows as you would on any other computer. The only thing that's typically not done that I did was choose a custom installation, remove all the partitions that were there before, and install it on the new unallocated space. The installation took around 5 minutes, but after that, the OS was installed and needed to reboot. After removing the flash drive media, I rebooted and sped through the initial setup process. After all that, I had Windows 10 running, but a few drives I needed were missing. Now the best way to get the drives would be to go to the respective hardware manufacturer's website and download the latest drives from them. I was able to do this for my graphics card, but I had trouble with the Gigabyte website to grab drivers from my motherboard. So, to overcome this, I grabbed the driver disk that came with my motherboard and installed the needed drives from there. After rebooting, I then downloaded and ran the graphics drive from Ika, which took around 5 minutes and simple to install. So far from the looks of it, everything's okay according to the device manager. Also from the MS Info 32 page, all my hardware elements are picked up. Now that I have Windows up and running on my PC, I want to get OS X running again and have it boot as my main OS. To do this, I shut down the PC and reconnected the SATA and power cables to my OS X SSD, and restarted but went to the BIOS by mashing F12 on my keyboard. Under hard drive BBS priorities, I had to select my OS X SSD in the list and then add it back to my boot options. After saving the changes and exiting, I ran it to make sure the Chimera screen came up and my OS would load. It worked, but now whenever I boot my PC, it'll always boot to OS X, but now I have the option to switch to Windows whenever Chimera appears by hitting the escape key. Now after using Windows on this machine, it shouldn't be a surprise that it runs a lot better than Yosemite since Windows was the intended OS for its hardware. I have full support of the components, including the ability to use the wireless/Bluetooth adapter, which I didn't have use of in Yosemite. Plus, the other issue that I had trouble with in Yosemite but not Windows was audio through my HDMI port. I now have the ability to use monitors with HDMI ports and utilize their speakers. I ran a few benchmarks on my hardware just to see where a graphics card, SSD, and memory stood up in relation to OS X. Using the tool Geekbench, I ran on both my graphics card and processor and got an OpenGL score of 98.73 FPS and a CPU score of 348 CB. Compared to results I ran in OS X in my last video, it's a pretty substantial gain over Yosemite and confirms that to get the best performance out of this hardware, it should be running Windows. I tested the graphics card again with another benchmark software called Heaven Benchmark from Unigent. I ran two tests, one with anti-aliasing on and another with it off, but keeping all other settings relatively the same. You can view the results from both here. Personally, I prefer anti-aliasing off, but I know some users use the setting, so I thought I'd include a test with it. For an Ssd test, I downloaded and ran Crystal Disk Mark. Running all 4 tests with 5 runs for each, you can judge for yourself the quality of this SSD. Unfortunately, I don't have the results for this drive with OS X installed, and I plan on using a better SSD for my Windows partition in the near future, so these test results are kinda null for me. For a final test, I ran the 32-bit tryout version of Geekbench on both OSs, mainly just to test the memory. Comparing the scores from both OSs, it's pretty much close to one another, with Windows edging out by a few more points. I'm curious to know what the 64-bit scores would have been, but I don't believe it's worth knowing for $15. Sorry, Geekbench. So overall, I like Windows 10 on this machine and having dual boot functionality. With it, I get the best of two operating systems with minimal effort involved. But I have to say I enjoy Windows 10 on this machine more than OS 10. Maybe it's because I enjoy Windows more often than Yosemite, or maybe I've grown attached to the Windows version of Steam. Either way, I like it and plan on improving it as time goes on. So that'll do it for me. This is Steve signing off, and thanks for watching.